What promise have we been claiming at the beginning of each of our meetings? Anybody remember? We've been claiming a promise at the beginning of our meetings. Anybody remember? For the Holy Spirit, yes. John 14, verse 26. For the Holy Spirit to do what? To be our teacher. Yes. So let's pray again. Thank you, Lord, for your promise to send the Holy Spirit to be our teacher. And we claim that promise again now. Just give us your wisdom. May we lay aside anything that might be between you and us, especially our own understanding, so that we can grasp a hold of what you're trying to say and what you want us to do as a result. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. If you remember this morning, we were talking about the difference between wise and foolish, and how God's wisdom appears to be foolish from a human perspective, and of course, human wisdom appears foolish from God's perspective. I want to open with the verse in Isaiah 55, verses 8 and 9. Let's turn there. Isaiah 55, verses 8 and 9. This has become a key verse in my Christian philosophy. And it totally fits with our message this morning, even though we didn't bring it out then. Okay, what is God telling us in Isaiah 55, 8 and 9? He says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways not your ways. Okay, for as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my thoughts and my ways higher than your ways and your thoughts. Okay, that, like I said, goes right along with what we were studying about this morning. And I think in our study this afternoon, that's going to be brought out. There's many things that God is telling us to do that seem crazy from a human perspective. And so the question is, are we going to follow what God's telling us to do or lean on our own understanding? See a hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that even though his thoughts are higher than our thoughts, his wisdom is easy to be entreated.
Yes. His wisdom is easy to be entreated. Yeah, there's the verse that says just that. And actually, as soon as we surrender our own understanding and our agenda and start grasping a hold of God's stuff, it makes more and more and more sense the deeper you get into it. To the point that we too see human wisdom as foolishness. And I think that's what's going to keep us safe, or that's one of the things that's going to keep us safe, because we're viewing things from God's perspective. And all this huge system, that's rises up against God in the end times, we won't want any part of it because we recognize the foolishness of it. Yeah. Okay. Take out your booklets. Turn to, let's see, it's page 23, quotation number 19. This is probably the least structured of all of my presentations. There's just a collection of quotations that I've put together here. This is actually a shortened version of them, but I think this has the key ones. And we're just going to read through these. It's quotation number 19 through quotation number 33 about. And we're just going to, work our way through and discuss them and the implications, bringing in Bible verses as it's appropriate. But before we do that, because I keep getting ahead of myself, I'm sorry. Turn to page 3. I guess we could do this either the first part of this session or the first part of next session. As I've gone around and talked to people, I've discovered that, is that timeline up there? Yes. There seems to be, a certain amount of confusion about the difference between country living and wilderness survival. And I think part of it is because, remember we talked last night about the two different parallels. And actually you bring Daniel in on it, there's 3 parallels to that prophecy in Matthew 24 that we studied last night. It applied both to the time of the destruction of Jerusalem back in AD 70. It applies also to the Dark Ages, and it applies to the end times. Now, obviously, we're focusing on the end times because that's what we're faced with. But we can look back at these other 2 parallels and learn a lot. In Matthew 24, Jesus said, when you see the abomination of desolation, flee to the mountains. Okay, he didn't delineate out the difference between first going to the country and then going to the wilderness, which for the time, the first century parallel, that's what they did. They fled once and that was it. Because of the global nature of the end time scenario, though, okay, our flight has 2 phases. And the one quote we read last night alluded to that. We'll go back and read that in just a moment. But there's actually, there's the country living phase where we're able to raise our own provisions because we're not able to buy or sell. But then the time's going to come when we have to leave that behind and flee to the most desolate and solitary places. And so there's those 2 different phases. And there's, like I said, there's a certain amount of confusion among God's people about that. And this is my attempt on page 3 here to separate some of that out, as well as this whole session and the next session. We're going to be getting more specific about country living this time and then the wilderness survival next time, this afternoon. And so I put together this chart. And so during the country living phase, you notice there's the 2 columns. During the country living phase, where will we be living? What will we be living in? Okay, yeah, possibly a cabin. What else? Let's say we're able to move out there now. Okay, we have our home. We'll be able to stay there. Okay? So you could put country homes. I think people that leave later, they're going to be more and more simple dwellings, what they're going to be able to put together. And the people that wait till the Sunday law to get out, I really feel sorry for them. Say more about that later, I think. So anyway, shelter during the first part of the time of trouble can be our country homes or possibly a cabin. Okay, during the second phase, where will we be living, or getting tangled up in my own words here. What will we be living in? Okay, possibly caves, possibly a tent. There's a brush shelter, picture of a brush shelter there. Okay, that's where we'll be staying during the second phase. Okay, heat. How will we be heating our homes out in the country during the first part of the time of trouble? Wood stove. And how will we be heating our shelters? The campfire. And this is why I hesitated a little bit when I talked about staying in a tent. Most tents are not designed to be heated with any kind of campfire. Okay? I've gotten spoiled doing wilderness survival camping because I like a campfire in connection with my shelter that can heat it. And when I go backpacking now and I don't have a fire to heat my tent, I miss it. And so anyway, that's a long story. Water. During the first part of the time of trouble, where will we be getting water? Okay, well, or if you have a spring on your property, maybe a spring. Okay, during the second part of the time of trouble, where will we be getting water? Probably, the river, the creek, maybe a lake if we're by a lake. Pardon? Pines? Oh, vines. Yes, possibly from different plant sources. Okay. Toilet facilities. Seems to be where the rubber meets the road here for a lot of us. Okay. What are our toilet facilities going to be in the first part of the time of trouble? Okay, depending on what our water system is in our homes. Okay, if we're dependent on electrical power to pressurize the water system, then the toilet's not going to flush anymore. I mean, there's no water coming to this faucet either, right? On the other hand, if we have, let's say, a gravity setup, spring-fed gravity system already set up, toilet's going to flush just fine. But here in California, where there's not that many springs around, number one, you might have to depend on something else. So whoever said outhouse, I think you're kind of thinking the right direction. Yes?
I said outhouse.
Good for you. Composting toilets are possibly another possibility, although I've had to just think the cost of composting toilet outhouse situation back and forth, and I think an outhouse is easier to deal with than a composting toilet, because you're always having to empty that composting toilet. Whereas if you have a well-built outhouse, you're set for a couple of years at least, maybe. Yeah, if you're set up with solar or wind power for your well, okay, you could also have pressurized water that way. My hesitancy with solar, though, is I don't know. I thought I announced this. Like a year and a month ago, we moved to Mariposa from Bakersfield. And so I've had an intense year-long experience in getting set up on country property. And that's going to be coming out from time to time here as we talk this afternoon. In our search for property, okay, we were going all up and down the state, up as far as Redding, even went back to Colorado, and because I have some connections back there, it's where my daughter lives. And we ran across a couple places that had solar setups already. Some were off the grid and some weren't. But just in looking at the properties, looking at these solar setups already, okay, I question the long-term viability of a solar. I mean, they're fairly fragile systems. There's stuff that can easily go wrong, and if you're not able to buy or sell to replace parts or batteries, or if your property gets raided and they throw a few rocks at your solar panels, there goes your solar system. And so I'm just a little reluctant to trust to a solar system. I mean, it might be, if you have it already set up and it's working good, that's great. But I'm thinking if you're depending on solar system, have a backup plan. Okay, really have a backup plan that works. Okay, during wilderness survival, second part of the time of trouble, what are we going to do for toilet facilities? Dig a hole behind the bush. Okay. They're commonly called cat holes because cats know from birth something that some humans never figure out, unfortunately. Yeah. Bathing. Okay, again, this depends on our water system. Kind of as we've talked, if you have a water system that's maintainable, you'll be able to take a bath in your bathtub and or shower. Okay, if not, how could you bathe? Let's say you have a hand pump backup system on your well. That's probably the simplest and would be the most common maybe. Okay, because you don't have a gravity-fed spring system, and so when you want water, you got to go out to your well and pump some water. That's the way they did it back in the day. Bring this water in, heat it up on your wood stove, put it in the wash tub, crawl in and take a bath. Or if you have a shower set up, you could rig a bucket, pour it over the top of you. Or like what we did up in Canada, we had a bucket and we mounted a spigot on the side and then put the bucket up here and turn the spigot on and crawl underneath and get wet and turn it off and get soaked up and then turn it on again and rinse off. Okay? You got your hand up?
My son, I got a son that he was learning work at the border Brazil with Venezuela.
Uh-huh.
And he had some experience having taken when they use a 5-gallon bucket.
Mm-hmm.
And then with another glass or something, he grabbed the water from the bucket and just
Yeah.
put it on top of his head.
Right.
As simple as that.
Yeah, it works. It works.
That's what my husband does all the time.
Good. It's getting ready.
He doesn't realize he's getting ready, but he
He
is.
is. Yeah. So, I mean, these simple, I'm trying to share simple ideas that work. Okay?
We heat the water up, we put it in the bucket, and we just get a towel and stand in the shower.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you got a shower stall, that's something you can do. Yeah. Okay. During the wilderness survival phase, how are we going to be taking a bath? Okay, yeah, if the weather's warm in the creek. If the weather's not warm, what are you going to do? Crawl in and get hypothermia anyway? Not wise.
Sponge baths.
Sponge baths, yes. I really need to get a hold of this reference. I've looked for it, haven't been able to find it. I think, come to think about it, there's a little book called God's Farm. Have any of you seen that? It's about the early education work. I think it's in there. I'll have to go look. Anyway, my understanding right now, this story dealt with Walla Walla College back in the very early days of the college. And the people that were in charge of the college in the dormitories there sent back to the brethren and the Great General Conference that they needed money for a bathroom, and shower facility. And they sent back detailed instructions on how to do a sponge bath. Yeah, I think that speaks volumes, so I'll just let it go at that. One thing I have done, and I might share this again tomorrow, but just real quick, if you don't have anything else, I did this with a plastic trash bag. Dug a hole in the sand, lined the plastic trash bag, and heated up water on the campfire, and poured water into the basin, and did my sponge bath, and I even wanted to just sit in it for a bit, and so I did that too. But, just simple ideas that work, okay? Again. All right, brings us down to washing clothes. During the first part of the time of trouble, how are we going to wash clothes? Pardon? Okay, maybe. Yeah, scrub board, wash tub. If you have, again, a solar system, you might have a washing machine that works on that. Different other possibilities there depending on how you're set up.
They make hand motion washing machines that you can use.
Yes, yeah, there's some hand motion wash machines, and then there's the old-fashioned solar dryers where you pin it on the line.
Yeah.
Yes, works good. Okay, yes, plunger in a wash tub. Yeah, I've got one of those. Got the scrub board too, but. Okay, washing clothes during the wilderness survival phase. That's where we go down to the river. Yeah, beat them against the rock, rinse them out good, wring it out. Okay, food during the first part of the time of trouble. What are we going to be eating? The stuff we grow in our gardens and fields and orchards. Yeah, I'm going to say something about this now because I'm afraid I'll forget later on. When we talk about growing our own food, what the first thing most people think about? The garden. Okay, but think about the stuff you grow in your garden. Second thing people think of is the orchard. But think about what you're growing in the orchard. Okay, what else do we eat a lot of that are neither garden crops nor orchard crops? Grains. Need to do more work with grains. and put more emphasis on grains. You know, with that in mind, I sowed, I don't know how big a patch it is, probably I don't even know. I didn't measure it. A little bit more than the area of this sanctuary here in wheat. And I got it in late, so I don't know how it's going to do. But, you know, I figured I got to start experimenting somewhere. It's growing good so far. Fortunately, we've had enough rain. God's sent enough rain to water it. If it starts drying out now, I'm not sure what's going to happen. Also, I have a little patch about this big, because that's all the seed I got, of an Ethiopian variety of barley. Now, the kind of barley like we have here in the States that's common, you need a machinery to hull it out. But this variety of barley will hull out with just beating on it like wheat. And that stuff already, I planted at the same time, that stuff already has ears starting to develop on it. Barley's a very quick growing grain. And so, anyway, I'm experimenting a little bit with grains. I have some other summer grains I'm going to experiment with. Just want to throw out the idea, encourage you all to experiment with grains. Because that's a big part of our diet, and we don't typically think about it when we talk about raising our own provisions. I think, for the most part, grains are much easier to grow than garden crops, for whatever that's worth. It just takes a bit more space. Okay, food storage. Oh, wait, we didn't do food during the second part of the time of trouble. What are we going to be eating during the second part of the time of trouble? What? Well, we'll talk about that in a bit. Yes, people are saying ravens and manna. I'm going to save that for next session, if we get to it. Whatever we can find in the woods. Wild edibles. Okay, wild edibles. No, we eat them. Yeah. For what it's worth, the natives that lived here in California, in the foothills especially, they had two main harvests each year. In the spring, it was the Brodea harvest. And in the fall was the acorn harvest. And we're just at the tail end of Brodea harvest time now. I still have do you know what I mean by Brodea? What you see is a long stem flower, maybe this tall, somewhere in here, and then it's a blue. Some people call them blue dicks. Trying to think of the other common name for them. Anyway, I've always known them by Brodea. There's several different varieties of Brodea. Like you look in the book, there's like about 2 pages worth of them. And on our property, we have the common Brodea, and then there's another harvest Brodea, which has a longer stem, and then the flowers come out. And they're like a lavender color, fairly large flower. But they're very distinctive because they go up above the grass level. And then there's a golden Brodea also. And anyway, all of them have an edible bulb. So you have to dig down a little bit, which you usually need to do about 2 or 3 of them before you figure out how to do it right. But anyway, Brodea, if you get a chance to go look at wildflowers, dig one up. You know, get a book and learn what the Brodea look like. Pardon? Wait, one at a time.
Okay. What if you're up higher? Like we're up at 7,000 feet.
Yeah.
I don't even see berries or anything up there. I don't know what there is. I've never seen anything else.
Oh, there's lots.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just tell you one thing. The pines, if nothing else, okay, if nothing else, the inner bark from the pines are edible. Okay?
Everybody likes dandelions.
Yeah, and dandelions grow up there too. The pine bark, it tastes real strong like pine, all right? but there's an inner bark layer. That's what the beetles are after. You know, the beetles that kill the trees? They're after that inner bark layer. But that's edible. And so if you got, you know, do you know how to tell the difference between pine trees and other evergreens, by the way? Okay, yeah, because some of there are a few evergreens that are poisonous, like the yew, which isn't really common, fortunately, but all of the pines are edible, and all of the pine nuts, and the pine needles, and so on. But I'm getting way ahead of myself doing that. Yeah, question here and then there.
Okay, thank you. You said something about the bulb of the...
The bulb.
The bulb. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Largest Indian wars in California between two tribes was fought over pine nuts, and that's how valuable pine nuts are. I know they're small, but they killed each other for them to the ground.
The ones they were fighting over aren't small.
Yeah, they're bigger than a lot of them.
Yeah, there's the pinyon pines kind of more on the south and on the eastern part. They're fairly large.
But even the ones up here that are smaller are edible.
Right. Yeah, well, the gray pine, that's all up and down like the lower foothill areas. And those are very edible and large.
They have a lot of fat in them.
Good stuff. That's my favorite wild edibles, pine nuts. Yeah.
In Idaho, they're still fighting over huckleberry patches.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and there's stuff around. Just need to learn what it is. We're going to talk some more about this tomorrow. So I'm going to move on right now. Okay, food storage. How are you going to store food? Because this is something that we overlook again. I've grown a whole crop of potatoes, right, in my garden. How am I going to store those potatoes until next year's crop comes out of the garden? Okay, yeah, root cellar is the best answer. I'll let you in on a secret. Last fall, I harvested some of my potatoes. I didn't get around to harvesting all of them. This spring, I went to dig up the garden bed, and there's still good potatoes down there. So if you have to leave them in the ground, I mean, you're trusting the gophers not to come and eat them in the meantime. But if you have to leave them in the ground, okay, that's better than almost better than pulling them out, because you pull them out and then they start to dry up and everything. Yes, sir.
There is a way to keep the potatoes even with no refrigerator. You can chop it off and let it dry.
Okay, dry them.
And dry them. Even the zucchini squash,
Yes.
Mexican squash.
Yes.
If they are tender, you can chop it off. I remember as a kid, my parents they keep it that way because I was born in central Mexico. We got a ranch out in the middle of nowhere. So
Yeah.
they have different ways to keep the food dry but fresh.
Right.
And they chop. Still remember that they chop the zucchinis and the Mexican squash, even tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
They slice them down and they
Mm-hmm.
put it right out. And they use a cord. Once
Right.
they're dry, they use a cord to put it a whole bunch of them, and they just leave it hanging out there
Yeah.
in the hangers. And they were good for 2-3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Drying is another good possibility.
When my mother, they were ready to cook them, she just put water in it, and some little salsa in it, and some tamales.
Now you're making me hungry. Yeah, good stuff. Okay, why am I saving canning for the bottom of the list? That's usually the first thing people think of when they think of food storage. You need to buy the rings each time, right? Not the rings, the lids. Okay, if you can't buy or sell.
Not necessarily.
You can
Yeah, you can reuse them, but it's iffy.
The ball ones.
Right. But they're even, your life is still limited there too. Yeah.
a couple times.
Yeah. Okay, food storage under wilderness survival. Ooh, everybody's drawing blanks. Might not be doing a whole lot of that, but you might.
You can still dig a mini cellar
A little mini root cellar or a rock enclosure. Yeah.
to a bank.
Yeah, you definitely want to have it rocked around so the wild animals wouldn't get to it, because they're after food too. Okay, cooking. How are we going to cook during the first part of time of trouble? Wood stove. Or what else? If you don't have a wood stove, because they're like $1,000 plus unless you happen to find a good old one. Okay, fireplace possibly. Anybody know about Dutch ovens? Find out about Dutch ovens. They make some good food. Okay, they're called Dutch ovens. They look like a big cast iron. Well, they come in all different sizes. I'll just pick one. This is family size right here. It has little 3 legs at the bottom so that you can set it on top of a bed of coals. And the top lid has a ring around so you can put coals on top and they don't roll off. And so you got heat coming from the top, heat from the bottom. Make some good food in those things. And you can buy them at Walmart. So just would encourage you to invest in at least one Dutch oven and play with it. Okay? Because that's your wood stove. The other thing is you can turn the lid, not all of them, but most of them, if you take the lid and turn it over. Well, let me tell you the picture. I haven't tried this yet. I'm just really wanting to. But they take the pot and turn it upside down, and so here the legs are sticking up, and they put coals on top of that, then they put the lid upside down on top of that. And here you have a skillet. It's a little bit dished like this rather than flat. But the guy was cooking pancakes on it just the same. Learn how to use cast iron cookware. You need to keep it seasoned so it doesn't rust real bad and all of that stuff. But a Dutch oven, you can cook, they say you can cook anything on a Dutch oven that you could cook on your stove. And so, that's the low-cost, portable wood cook stove.
Makes a good upside-down pineapple cake, too.
Yeah, make some really good food. Yeah. Okay, cooking during wilderness survival phase. Yeah, over the campfire. Okay, and that's a whole skill too. We'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow maybe.
In this area, you can also cook with the sun.
A solar, right? Except you may not be packing solar stuff along with you on the. During the first phase, yes. Okay, equipment. I didn't know what else to call this category, but this is just the amount of stuff that you have, equipment-wise. Includes everything from cooking utensils to tools to fix the car to tractor or whatever else. Okay, during the first part of the time of trouble, what type of equipment are we going to be able to make use of? In other words, what stuff could we have? The good kind. A good knife. Now I'm talking about during the first part of the time of trouble. What?
Forks and utensils like forks.
Right. Yeah, in our homes. Okay. Actually, we could have anything then that we have now, except for power equipment. Okay, hand tools. Probably pretty much limited to hand tools. You have all the stuff in your house. So there's some power equipment there in the kitchen. That probably wouldn't work. But everything else would work. All your tools in the garage, hand tools, non-power equipment. Again, shed full of garden stuff, all of that you still have. Okay, during the second part of time of trouble, what type of equipment? Here's the good knife the brother's talking about. Okay, basically everything needs to fit into your backpack. So like your whole house and garage and shed gets condensed into that backpack. We're going to talk more about that later. So I'm not going to go into that specifically now. Okay, ministry during the first part of time of trouble. Okay, probation hasn't closed yet. So we're still doing ministry as the Lord leads. And during the second part of time of trouble, okay, this is after probation is closed. Who are you still ministering to? Whoever you happen to be with. Okay? I'm getting way ahead of myself if I totally answer that one right now. So I hope this little chart here and what we've just talked about helps you understand the difference between the first part of the time of trouble and the second part of the time of trouble, and what we'll be doing during those times. Just for illustration, I was talking to a man and his wife up in Alaska once, and from their perspective, they were doing wilderness survival, or at least the guy. Okay, they lived way back in the woods somewhere. They were surviving at their home out in the wilderness, and so they thought that was wilderness survival. And maybe from a perspective it is, okay, but that's not what we're talking about where we're going to be going during the second part of time of trouble when we flee to the most desolate and solitary places. You're going to have to leave those homes behind, no matter how far back in the woods you might have your home. Okay, we'll talk more about that next session. Okay, now let's go to the quotations starting on page 23. Number 19, this first one we read last night already. And again, be prepared for God's ways and God's thoughts to be different from our ways and our thoughts. Because some of the counsel here goes directly against the direction our whole culture is pushing us. Okay, in a very real sense, our culture, and probably every other culture around the world too, for that matter, Satan has worked things out so we're totally set up to receive the mark of the beast. And so if we're going to not receive the mark of the beast, we're going to have to go against our culture. And that's going to come out as we talk about this here a bit, so just want to warn you. Okay, number 19. Again and again, the Lord has instructed that our people are to take their families where? Away from the cities, into the country where they can do what? Raise their own provisions. For in the future, the problem of buying and selling will be a very serious one. We should now begin to heed the instruction given us over and over again. Get out of the cities into rural districts where the houses are not crowded closely together, where you'll be free from the interference of enemies. Okay, one question I get a lot is, where do you go? And so we're finding some clues here, and that's one of the things we're going to be looking for as we go through these quotations. So what clues does this quotation give us about where to go? Okay, out of the cities, number one. Rural district. Where the houses are not crowded closely together. Okay, I remember looking at one house. I just looked at it on the internet. As soon as I went to the aerial photo, I realized, oh, that's not where we want to go. Here's the main road. The house was back here off the main road. However, it had a shared driveway, and the neighbor's house was right there. It was as close together as anybody in town. Well, if that neighbor was, good, believing friend or family, that'd be one thing. But if it's not, you're too close. I've already said that about don't wait till Sunday law to move out. My experience over the past year has just heavily underlined that. It's a lot of work, a lot involved getting set up out in the country where you can raise your own provisions. We have a huge garden and orchard, and I would still say, even though we're doing quite a bit, we're still not raising all of our own provisions yet. I told you about experimenting with grains. That's a big part of it. It just takes time to get set up. You plant, let's say you're able to buy a bare root tree, and you put it into the ground. When are you going to get fruit from that tree? Yeah, well, there's some trees that we planted last spring that have a little bit of fruit on them now. But, it's not adequate production yet, see? So you're talking several years before you have adequate production, and by then that all might be done. And you've gone through all the work of fixing the ground and digging the holes and planting the tree and caring for it, watering it, and then Jesus comes before you get any fruit off of it, you know. You know, we need to be getting out now and getting set up now. You know, and that whole picture is like multiplied over and over and over again with every facet of life almost. Okay, next quote. Number 20. Let children no longer be exposed to the temptations of the city that are ripe for destruction. Back in 1905, the cities were ripe for destruction. What does that tell us about where things are now? Overripe. Putridly rotten. Yeah, rotten to the core. Okay, the Lord has sent us warning and counsel to get out of the cities. Then let us not do what? It said, make no more investments in the cities. Talk to God about that one, how that applies to your particular situation. Okay, make no more investments in the cities. Fathers and mothers, how do you regard the souls of your children? Are you preparing the members of your family for translation into the heavenly courts? Are you preparing them to become members of the royal family, children of the heavenly King? What shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? How will ease, comfort, convenience compare with the value of the souls of your children? And just for a negative example here, I want to remind you of Lot's story. Okay? It's real interesting. Jesus said, you know, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be in end times, and also says it was the days of Lot, referring to the Sodom and Gomorrah and the flood thing. But I think we have an example in Noah's example and Lot's, contrasting with Lot's example. And there's a lot in common, but there's some stuff that they did very differently. Noah prepared. Okay? Spent 120 years preparing. And so when the time came for them to flee, he had a well-stocked survival kit. On the other hand, Lot and his family, they didn't prepare at all. The angels had to grab them by the hands and haul them out. You know, and told them, escape to the mountains. Same thing we've been told. On the way out of town, Lot's wife ends up turning to a pillar of salt. And Lot ends up in a cave with a couple of perverted daughters who'd been in the city way too long. Okay? So just the contrast in those two families and their legacy is marked. Now, number 21. The time has come when as God opens the way, I think that's a key phrase. We're going to run across it several times here. So I would underline, as God opens the way. And from my experience, that's one of the reasons I'm having you underline that. You know, don't run ahead of God, don't lag behind, but as God opens the way. Families should move out of the cities. Children should be taken into the country. By the way, if I had young kids right now, I would get them as far away from the city as I could. The parents should get as suitable a place as their means will allow. That's another guideline on where to go. As suitable a place as their means will allow. If you don't have a lot of means, you're going to have to settle for something pretty simple. You know, don't set some standard and say, God, I've got to have this. You know, you don't do that with God. Because, well, the best way I think I can illustrate that is I heard of a sermon. I really wish I could have heard the sermon. But my friend told me about it, and, you know, I can share. You get the picture real quick. Think of all the times when God provided food for people in the Bible. The different Bible stories when he provided food for people. Okay, what did he give Elijah? Bread and water. Another story where God provided food for people. What? Okay, the manna, which is basically bread. Okay. Another time, when God provided food for people? Okay, the quail, yeah, until it came out their noses. That wasn't his plan, though. That's because they complained. The widow. Okay, what did he provide for her? Bread and water. Yeah, oil and flour for bread. Anybody else? The loaves and the fishes? Yeah, okay. Anyway, from my understanding, the pastor went through all of these different times. And the one thing common in all of them is whenever God provided, it's like super simple food. Just bread and water, basically. Maybe fish, maybe a little bit of vegetables. See? And so if we're telling God, no, I can't go at this level, I've got to have this standard of living up here, and this is what God's offering us, we're going to miss it. Seemed like the wise and foolish thing we call this morning, right? You know, God's offering it, but because we have other stuff in mind, we don't accept what God offers. Get as suitable a place as their means will allow. Though the dwelling may be small, yet there should be land in connection with it that may be cultivated. Okay, here's another clue as to where to go. Make sure you've got some land that you can cultivate. Place to grow gardens and orchards and grain fields. Next quote. More and more as time advances, our people will have to leave the cities. For years we have been instructed that our brethren and sisters, and especially families with children, should plan to leave the cities as the way opens before them to do so. Again, here's the idea of as the way opens. Many will have to labor earnestly to help open the way. Okay, we have to do our part. But until it is possible for them to leave, so long as they remain, they should be most active in doing what? Missionary work, however limited the sphere of influence may be. There is a group on Facebook that I belong to. They made me an administrator of it, although I don't act as an administrator at all because I don't get to get on Facebook very much. But it's called Country Living and Wilderness Survival. Anyway, something to do with the end times. It's a big, long name. Anyway, somebody made a comment there that they were, I guess, sitting around the table on Sabbath once and with the, kind of extended family. And they had noticed that all of the people that they knew that were into medical missionary work weren't doing country living, and all of the people that were doing country living weren't involved in ministry. And I had to write back and say, well, I can understand why you're saying what you're saying, but the people that I can think of that are doing country living are doing it because of their ministry.
Can you repeat all of that, please?
Oh, mercy.
No. The people who are working in medical ministry
are not doing country living. And the people that are doing country living are not involved in ministry. Okay, and so I wrote back and I said the people that I know of that are doing country living are doing it because of their ministry. But from my experience this past year, I could totally understand how it just would be so easy to get wrapped up in getting your place in the country set up that ministry would be neglected. Because it's so overwhelming. My wife and I have just, we have to say, well, yeah, everything's not ready and we're, the garden is full of weeds, but we've got to do this program anyway. And so we had a bunch of people come up to our place about a month ago for Wilderness and Country Living Skills Camp. And we were embarrassed to death about the garden because it looked like a big weed patch, which we're getting under control now. But, you've got to put ministry first. Jesus said, seek ye first the kingdom. And so if you don't already have a strong ministry focus before you move out, it's very unlikely that you'll develop it once you get there. And so that's why I just want to emphasize this quotation here. until it's possible for them to leave, so long as they remain in the city, they should be most active in doing missionary work, however limited the sphere of their influence may be. Build the habit of making ministry first. Seeking first the kingdom. Because if you're doing only limited ministry and God knows that if He sent you out, you wouldn't be doing anything, why should He open the way for you to go out? Because you're going to be less effective in His cause. Now maybe I should just underline here that I understand that everybody has their own unique ministry. Like in the 1 Corinthians there where it talks about spiritual gifts. There's all the different body parts. And there's some people, the hand can't say to the foot, I don't need you. The eye can't say to the ear, well, you're not an eye, so you're not part of the body. There are some people that would like us all to be mouths or something else like that. Okay, God has given you your unique place in the body and your unique ministry that goes along with that. And Randy emphasized that in Sabbath school this morning, which was good. Don't let somebody else try to squeeze you into what they think you ought to be doing. You connect with God. What's the work He wants you to do? And so, yes, your ministry may not be recognized by anybody else. But if you know that that's what God wants you to be doing, that's what you need to do. Okay? Just wanted to make that clear. Number 23. There is not one family in how many? 100 that will be improved physically, mentally, or spiritually by residing in the city. I read that again. There's not one family in 100 who will be improved. Not even 1 in 100 who would be improved physically, mentally, or spiritually by residing in the city. Faith, hope, love, happiness can far better be gained in retired places where there are fields and hills and trees. Take your children away from the sights and sounds of the city, away from the rattle and din of streetcars and teams. Well, we don't have the rattle and din of streetcars and teams. What do we have nowadays? What? Just traffic noise. What else? Airplanes. What else? Something I really notice when I come to the city is sirens. Never hear them up where I'm at. You come down here, you hear them all the time. Okay? We lost my place. Rattle and din of streetcars and teams, and their minds will become more healthy. Like all this noise pollution isn't healthy. It will be found easier to bring home to their hearts the truths of the Word of God without all the noise and other stuff that goes along with the city. Number 24, if you got any comments or questions, just raise your hand, okay? 24, send the children to schools located in the city where every phase of temptation is waiting to attract and demoralize them. I mean, it's like lying in wait, remember, who was it, James? No, Peter said, Satan's like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. Just like a cat, just waiting to pounce on something that comes by. I've got a 3/4 grown kitten at home that is totally that way. Hangs out underneath the bed, have a little bed curtain there, and you walk past and pounce. Yeah. Send the children to schools located in the city where every phase of temptation is waiting to attract and demoralize them. And the work of character building is what? Tenfold harder for both parents and children. You want to make your parenting job easier? Get out of the city. For what it's worth, I'm not sure if they're still going or not, but there was a skills, country living skills gathering / camp in Oklahoma, and they called it the Tenfold Advantage Family Camp, based on this quote. You know, we have like a tenfold advantage being out in the country, tenfold disadvantage being in the city, trying to raise your kids. And just maintain your own spirituality. Number 25, if the poor now crowded into the cities could find homes in the land, they might not only earn a livelihood, but find health and happiness now unknown to them. And notice this next list. What's it start out with? Hard work, simple fare. What's that mean? What's simple fare? Simple foods. Okay. Close economy. What's that mean?
Small budget.
Yeah, small budget. Real tight budget too. Okay, close economy, often hardship and privation. What's privation? Going without. Okay, notice this list again. Hard work, simple fare, close economy, often hardship and privation would be their lot. Okay, if you move out in the country, that's what you're setting yourself up for. I'm just going to be really honest, because that's exactly what I've experienced this past year. And that's exactly the opposite direction from what our culture says our values should be, right? Our culture is set up, flip a switch, make it easy for you. Okay, during no buy, no sell, and especially during the wilderness survival phase, there isn't going to be any switches to flip. That means anything you do, you're going to have to do it yourself. I mean, anything and everything. You know, just think how often we flip a switch or turn a knob and there it is. You know, you want water? No, you got to go out to the well and pump it and bring it in with a bucket. You want light? You've got to go find a match and get your candle or lamp or whatever it is and, you know, light it, so on. I mean, I'm not trying to discourage anybody here, but because I'm afraid that's what I've been ending up doing. I'm just trying to be real. You know, our culture is setting us up to receive the mark of the beast. These are the things that God says. This is what to expect when you move out. Let's look at the next quote. Well, let me finish this one here. Hard work, simple fare, close economy, often hardship and privation would be their lot, but what a blessing would be theirs in leaving the city. With its enticements to evil, its turmoil and crime, misery and foulness, for the country's quiet, peace, and purity. Okay, the next quote goes right with this. It says, an expensive dwelling, elaborate furnishings, display, luxury, and ease, that's what our culture tells us is important, do not furnish the conditions essential to a happy, useful life. Okay, Jesus came to this earth to accomplish what? The greatest work ever accomplished. Think about that. Jesus could have come any way he wanted to. Okay, God could have set it up so that Jesus' earth life was any way they wanted it to be. And what did they choose? Okay, he came as God's ambassador to show us what? How to live so as to secure life's best results. And what were the conditions chosen by the infinite Father for his Son? Born in a manger. That's how it all started out. Okay, a secluded home in the Galilean hills. A household sustained by honest, self-respecting labor. A life of simplicity, as in uncomplicated rather than simple-mindedness. There's two different types of simplicity there. Daily conflict with difficulty and hardship. Self-sacrifice. Economy. Sounds like that other list we read in the other quote, right? This is the way God chose for Jesus to live because that's the best way. And our culture says, no, you want luxury and convenience and switches to flip. You know, not that these things are wrong, it's just that it's easy for our focus to get aimed the wrong direction. A secluded home in the Galilean hills, a household sustained by honest, self-respecting labor, a life of simplicity, daily conflict with difficulty and hardship, self-sacrifice, economy, and patient, gladsome service. The hour of steady at his mother's side with the open roll of scriptures, the quiet of dawn or twilight in the green valley, the holy ministries of nature, the study of creation and providence, and the soul's communion with God. These were the conditions and opportunities of the early life of Jesus. Okay, something to think about. Next quote, number 27. Okay, God will help his people to find such homes outside the cities. It's a promise. God will help you. But be willing to take the first steps. Okay? We talked about that this morning, the children of Israel, right? God's saying, move forward. But that's just an ocean there. Go forward. Don't see how you can get there, but at least start making steps. I have to share, my cousin's daughter was living about a year ago, up until about a year ago, in a second-story apartment. No yard. All she had was like a balcony on the north side of the building. Anybody knows anything about gardening, that's the side that gets the least sun. So she started doing some container gardening on the balcony. Grew some peas and carrots, her daughter promptly devoured. But it was good experience, right? She was doing what she could do, taking steps that she could take. Well, within the past year, God is giving them another place to stay where their rent is less, and they have a nice big backyard. And they already have several, I was down there to visit them a couple weeks ago, and they have several tomato plants and pepper plants and stuff already in. So I use that as an illustration, as you do what you are able, even if it's only planting a few vegetables in a pot on a balcony that faces north. But you do what you can do, God will open the way for more. And so now they have more and they're able to do something there. They're still kind of in town, we'd like them to get out. But, that's the way God's leading them. Maybe he has something for them to do there still. God will help his people to find such homes outside the city. Number 28 has another principle there. The people should learn as far as possible to depend upon the products they can obtain from the soil. That one probably should have come earlier when we were talking about what it means to grow our own food. And then 29 kind of goes along with that. If the land is cultivated, it will, with the blessing of God, supply our necessities. There's a promise. Okay, but we've got to do our job in cultivating the land. We are not to be discouraged about temporal things because of apparent failures, nor should we be disheartened by delay. We should work the soil cheerfully, hopefully, gratefully, believing that the earth holds in her bosom rich stores for the faithful worker to garner, stores richer than gold or silver, which during the time of no buy, no sell, gold and silver is not going to do us any good anyway, right? But if you got stuff growing in the garden, you can eat it. The niggardliness laid to her charge is false witness. With proper intelligent cultivation, and that's a whole study in itself. Fortunately, there's a lot of good information out there about good gardening methods. Lost my place, sorry. With proper intelligent cultivation, the earth will yield its treasures for the benefit of man. The mountains and hills are changing, the earth is waxing old like a garment, but the blessings of God, which spread a table for his people in the wilderness, will never cease. Serious times are before us, and there is great need for family to get out of the cities into the country, that the truth may be carried into the byways as well as into the highways of the earth. Sounds like us in Mariposa and y'all over in Raymond. Much depends, this is a key phrase here. Much depends upon laying our plans according to the word of the Lord and with persevering energy carrying them out. Okay? Much depends upon laying our plans according to the word of the Lord. If we don't do it God's way, how can we expect Him to bless it? And persevering energy carrying them out. More depends upon consecrated activity and perseverance than upon genius and book learning. All the talents and abilities given to human agents, if unused, are of little value. So I'm like, steady up on all this stuff, but more depends on doing it. Okay, number 30. When iniquity abounds in a nation, there is always to be heard some voice giving warning and instruction, as the voice of Lot was heard in Sodom. Kind of talked about Lot already. Yet Lot could have preserved his family from many evils had he not made his home in this wicked, polluted city. And notice this next phrase. All that Lot and his family did in Sodom could have been done by them even if they had lived in a place some distance away from the city. Think about all that. What good did Lot accomplish? Really? Okay? But he was still God's witness, okay? And it says that witness is necessary, and Lot did provide that, but he did it at the expense of his family, which is where he shouldn't have. All that Lot and his family did in Sodom could have been done by them even if they had lived in a place some distance away from the city. And she's contrasting Lot with Enoch here. Enoch walked with God and yet did not live in the midst of any city polluted with every kind of violence and wickedness as did Lot in Sodom. So how do we do that? Well, the next quote points that out. It says, the cities are to be worked from what? Outposts, said the messenger of God. Shall not the cities be warned? Yes, not by God's people living in them, but by their visiting them, to warn them of what is coming upon the earth. Okay, we need to warn people what's coming. That's one of the reasons we did the study last night. Warn people of what's coming. Unfortunately, we don't talk about the prophecies as much as we used to. Okay, number 33. But ere long there will be such strife and confusion in the city that those who wish to leave them will not be able. We must be preparing for these issues. I'll probably mention this again, but I think it's History Channel, might have been Discovery Channel, but I'm pretty sure it was History Channel, did a documentary a few years back called After Armageddon. Has anybody seen that? Yeah, one person back there. The rest of you need to watch this. You can look it up on YouTube, or I suppose you could buy the DVD from History Channel. If I had time, I would take it to show it to you. But what they did is it's basically a documentary with a storyline. And what they did is they went around and talked to a lot of the experts around the country as to what would happen if there was a major disaster where a lot of the people died off and the structural, the infrastructure of society broke down. And so they're interviewing these people and excerpts from the interviews, but then they have a storyline of a family down in the LA basin somewhere. And the scenario they go with is a huge flu epidemic that 80% of the people die, and just what would happen. And the reason I share that is because what they depict in that video happening totally validates what we've been told in the prophecies. And it's like a completely secular source, nothing religious connected with it at all. I've got a few exceptions with the video because of what we know. You know, the people should have gotten out. The neighbors left when they saw it coming down. These guys stuck around for a couple of weeks, and if they, in reality, if they had waited that long, I don't think they ever would have got out of town. It also has them walking across on the Mojave Desert on foot without any equipment or water. You know, they wouldn't have made that either. But aside from little things like that, it's definitely worth watching. And then, anyway, won't tell you more about it. Just watch it. It's called After Armageddon. Yes? Okay, well, God's given us a sign when to get out, right? Yes, I'm talking about the National Sunday Law. And so we can get out before. If we wait around, it's going to be like what this quote says. Oh, I actually haven't read it yet. I'm sorry. Let's read them here. We're on number 32. The ungodly cities of our world are be swept away by the besom of destruction. Okay, remember the pictures of the tsunami over in Japan? I mean, I was thinking about this quote when I was watching them, you know, just swept away. A besom, by the way, is a large broom like what they use for sweeping streets. That's what that word means. The ungodly cities of our world are be swept away by the besom of destruction. In the calamities that are now befalling immense buildings and large portions of cities, God is showing us what will come upon the whole earth. Okay? Do you believe that prophecy? Don't stick around. Number 33, but ere long there will be such strife and confusion in the cities that those who wish to leave them will not be able. I'm sorry, I thought I had already read that. But ere long there will be such strife and confusion in the cities that those who wish to leave them will not be able. We must be preparing for these issues. And so when we see our promised sign, we need to get out. After the national, this is what I tell people. After the National Sunday Law, the only reason I'm going to go into any kind of large city is for doing missionary work under the direct guidance of the Holy Spirit. Because I don't want to get stuck in town and not be able to leave. I'm searching for a date, probably mid to late 1970s. Okay, we were homeschooling our kids, and we had a homeschool group, and one of the ladies came in from the church to teach them some art one day, and her husband, well, her son went to school with me, was one of my classmates. So anyway, we know this lady. Her husband was one of the county sheriffs. And she told us at that time, we got talking about this stuff, and she said that they had plans, this is for Bakersfield, they had plans to take the city buses and block off the roads and contain the city if there was like a nuclear blast or any big disaster like that. Back in the 70s already, right? Since then, I have heard of similar plans for other cities around. So, yeah, those who want to leave will not be able after some point. They're going to lock down the cities. See, fortunately, we've been given a sign when to get out before. And just let me emphasize, just think about all the other times when God has pulled his people out of something. I mean, even Lot in Sodom, he always pulls his people out before the disaster strikes. And so we're going out in faith. You know, like when Noah went into the ark and the door was shut, no rain, no nothing. 7 days later, it starts raining. You know, Noah was in there on faith. And I think the same thing's going to be with us. Sunday law is going to come along. There's no reason to go. Everything's sane. But as soon as God's people get out, and whatever God's timing is, then it all breaks loose, and then you're like, oh, I wish I would have gotten out, because I can't now. Well, God says, well, I told you. You know, whose fault is that, his or ours? Randy.
I was reading that for most cities, there's only a 45-minute window to get out if there is some kind of reason to shut down the city.
Yeah, 45-minute window. I had heard 2 hours, but 45 minutes sounds more reasonable. You know, I mean, fortunately, we've been given a sign to get out ahead before it happens. Now, you brought up another point. Okay, what if it's time to go and you don't have a place to go to? Going to talk more about this later. Remember the Matthew 24 is a parallel prophecy. What was the first parallel?
Surrounding the city.
Jerusalem. What was their sign? When you see the armies surrounding the city, right? Suppose a Christian wait. When you see the armies surrounding the city, you're supposed to do what? Flee. And what are the instructions for the flight? We read them last night. Do we need to read them again? Matthew 24, 17, and 18. Look them up right quick. Matthew 24, 17, and 18.
When the armies withdrew, they were to leave instantly.
That's right.
Oh, don't go back to the
Just read it.
Oh, 17 and 18?
17, 18. Read it aloud so people in the back can hear too.
Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes.
Okay. Here's our friend Christian, and he has a field, bunch of little plants outside the city. And so one morning he goes out, and he's working in the field, and he gets hot, and he lays his cloak down where he can pick it up on his way back to the city that evening. A little later, he hears a noise, and he looks up at the city, and here's the Roman army surrounding the city. What's the first thing he thinks about? When you see the city surrounded, flee. What direction is he supposed to flee? Away from the city. What's the second thing that goes through his head? The verse that she just read that Jesus said, right? And where's his coat? Back there. So what's he got to do? Flee without his coat. I'll do this again. There's another lesson from this. Picture a map of the Mediterranean world. Okay? Here's Spain and Italy and Greece and then Turkey and Judah's over here. And here's Egypt and North Africa. Well, this comes together more, right? Straits of Gibraltar here. if you wanted to get from this part, and this is the Roman Empire, you wanted to get from this part down to here, where'd you go? Through Judea. If you're down here and you want to go up here, through Judea again. Okay, Judea was central to the empire, land-wise. I mean, you could take ships across, and they did that a lot. Why would armies come and surround Judea, Jerusalem in particular? For example, I'm just going to pick Denver because I'm more familiar with Colorado. I think the actual geographic center of the United States is in the middle of Kansas somewhere. But Colorado's close enough, and I'm just going to pick Denver. Is there any reason for armies to surround Denver? No. But if Colorado decided they wanted to pull out of the Union, what do you know is going to happen? Denver's going to get laid siege to, right? Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out at all. You know the history of what happened here? This surrounding happened in the fall of AD 66. You know what happened in the spring of that year? The famous Jewish revolt. You following me? So the Jews revolted against Rome in the spring of AD 66. The armies didn't show up until that fall. Now, I mean, things took a lot longer then than they do now. So given that political situation, why would a Christian who knows Christ's words, who knows the prophecies in Daniel 9 especially, be out here working in his field? Let me come at it from another angle. How far does an army march in one day? I mean, that's how they got around back in the day, right? How far can you walk in a day?
20 miles.
20 miles is a good day. When they're coming across in the wagon trains, if they got in a 20-mile day, that was a good day for them.
Well, Julius Caesar, they marched 30 miles in a day. They took their whole army.
Yeah, that was exceptional, right? So 20 miles was a good day. 20 miles to us is nothing. So, I mean, we kind of lose the perspective here. Okay, but 20 miles. How fast can a horse run? How fast can a horse run? Anybody? Yeah, I heard 30, 35, 40. Yeah, I mean, that's a really fast horse if he can do 40. No, he can't do it all day. He probably can't even do it for an hour. Okay? But my point is, a horse can run faster. Let's say he could run for an hour. Okay, he's going to go farther than the army walking all day is going to go. Okay, the Jews revolted in the spring of the year. They set up their own government. They minted their own money. Now, I've never heard this, but undoubtedly they had scouts out in the country. And I doubt that Jerusalem was terribly surprised when the armies showed up, because the scouts would hop on the horseback and run back to town. And you would have this probably 2 or 3 day warning that the armies were on their way, if they had any kind of efficiency at all in their government. And so with the armies being on their way, why would you be out there working unless you weren't watching and waiting like Jesus and being ready like Jesus told you to? See, we look at these verses and we think, that's the way it's supposed to be. But understanding the history here, these verses are like God's being merciful, okay? Even if you're not watching until the armies show up, at least get out. Save your life. But if you're watching and ready, like Jesus said to be, there in verse 42 to 44, you had almost half a year's warning. You could get out, take anything with you that you wanted to take. Have time to plan, place to go, so on. But if you wait till the last minute, you're going to have to just go and even leave your coat behind. Again, it gets back to what are your expectations, like we talked about this morning. Do you really expect this to happen? Or are you going to put it off as long as possible to accomplish whatever else it is that's on your agenda? Yes, brother?
Just to make sure I'm understanding, you're talking about the implementation of the National Sunday Law or a literal surrounding of wherever by an army or governmental force or both. I just want to give myself clarity.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting there's people here that weren't here last night. The prophecy in Matthew 24 is a parallel prophecy that actually has 3 different applications. It applied to what happened back in the first century, which is what we're diagramming here on the board. It applied also to the Dark Ages, and it applies to the end times, which we have diagrammed up here. Okay? The signal event, that's the sign that it's all going to go down for the people in the first century, was Jerusalem being surrounded by armies. That's Luke 21, verses 20 and 21. Yeah, that figures into that. Okay, our sign for the end times is the National Sunday Law. Okay, there's no city being surrounded. That's our sign now. We're just looking back into history and finding what we can learn from it.
So applying that to the future
Yeah, what I'm applying to the future is I'm not sure exactly what form it's going to take, but we will undoubtedly have some warnings, and I think they are just recognizing that they're talking about National Sunday Law stuff already. It should be a huge warning to us that this stuff is getting close. And so some morning, yes, we're going to wake up and the armies will be surrounded, or there will be a National Sunday Law. And if we wait till then, we might have to get out with a whole lot less preparation or options than if we get out ahead of time.
I have a question.
Sure.
Today's is kind of like an internet age.
Yes.
Google and what else we use when we drive, we use GPS. What made you think that you can escape from people if they want to look for you, even if you live in the countryside?
Okay, he's talking about all the technology we have in our age now. Pardon? With satellite, no one can really hide. You know why I'm going?
Because you're told to.
Because I'm told to. Exactly, because that's what Jesus told me to do. Whether I'm found or not is immaterial. I'm obeying what Jesus told me to do. In fact, as I study, the picture that I get at the very end, oh yeah, there's something on that chart that we didn't talk about last night. That 7th plague, cosmic event time, that's when the death decree goes into effect. The death decree is issued, that's when we flee. Death decree goes into effect on that date. The picture I get is, yes, we've all been found, and we're surrounded, and they're just waiting for midnight when the date goes in, the date clicks over to pull the trigger, so to speak. Instead, at midnight, there's this big earthquake, and they realize, oops, we thought we were doing God a favor to get rid of these people, and these are God's special people. Okay? So I get asked that question a lot. If we're going to be found, why flee? The answer is because that's where God told us to go. That's where He knows that we'll be the best off. You know, to human reasoning that may not make sense, but That's what He's told us to do. Here and then here.
Well, the first thing that happens when they do something like that is to control the masses.
Yes.
And with urbanization, that's where the masses are going to
Right.
They're not going to go for the little areas. They
Right.
control the masses. Once they got them under control, yes,
Then they start mopping up. Yes. Did y'all hear what he said? He says the first thing they go for is to control the masses. And then they start, working their way out. And that may very well be the way it is here. And that gives us time to be out and a little bit of safety while we're out until they find us. Yes?
I will remind you of the many times that Jesus said, well, we're going to do this because it fulfills Scripture. Like with John,
Yes. Right, yeah, he said that a lot.
Yes, many, many times.
Yeah.
So we just do what we're told.
Exactly.
We don't know who's watching. We don't know who it's going to click with.
Well, that totally figures in with what we're talking about this morning. It may seem like foolishness to us, but that's what God told us to do, so we go ahead and do it anyway. Trusting His wisdom, not our own. Sure.
The thing is that, we want to talk about Sunday law, but, in many parts of the world, there is lots of religious persecution.
Mm-hmm.
In many Muslim countries or communist countries. Seems like that if we just focus on the Sunday's law, then it seems to take our eyes away from what is happening around the world today. Do you think that?
A little bit.
Mm-hmm.
This is something I forgot to say last night at the end of the meeting, and I guess now is as good a time as any. But is the National Sunday Law just another end-time event? No, it's not. Okay, it is the signal event. I think sometimes, there's all of these signs, all these different events, and the National Sunday Law gets thrown into the mix and it becomes just another event. It's not. It is the signal event. And so the signal event is when it happens in the United States. And so that's why I'm emphasizing the Sunday Law, to counter-emphasize it getting thrown into the mix and just considered another event. Because if it's just another event, oh yeah, we had this huge earthquake, here's the National Sunday Law, here's another disaster, whatever, and we don't think anything special, but the National Sunday Law tells us, okay, the great time of trouble is starting. We're in the home stretch right now. Jesus is going to come real soon.
And that's the time to flee to wherever. Not the time. That's not the country living time.
No, notice where National Sunday Law is on the chart up there. Okay? At that point, we're to flee the cities where we can raise our own provisions out in the country. Okay, later on, as things progress, then as a result of the first few plagues, that's when we flee to the most desolate and solitary places. Okay, 2 phases to our flight. So, back to your question. Okay, yes, we need to be concerned about our brothers and sisters in the other countries that are facing a lot more serious persecution than we are right now. We will be there soon too. And I think there's a lot we can learn from them because we don't have persecution in this country yet. And we don't really know how to deal with it. So we'd be wise to learn what we can from them. But we need to focus on the Sunday Law because that is the signal event also. Is there any way we can actually try to help those people? Sometimes, sometimes not. If there's something that we can do, I think we should do it. But frequently we hear about something that already happened you know, and we can't turn the clock back and fix it. So, you know, as God opens the way for us to be able to do something about it, then yes, we should.
Actually, there are things that are going on now behind the scenes, but because it's so dangerous, they can't even publicize it because
Right.
they can't let
Right.
them know where these things are happening.
Right.
That's how dangerous it is.
Right. So yeah, there is stuff happening, but you know, it boils down to being individually led by the Holy Spirit to do what He has for us to do. Any other questions, comments? Yes.
Is there any instruction on how far to go away? Okay, I'm going to just be very personal right here. My husband and I have been preparing to go out of state. However, my daughter just had our first grandbaby, and I kind of feel like Lot's wife.
Okay, are you
but,
talking about the first part of the time of trouble or the second
Yeah,
part of
I'm
the time of
talking
trouble?
about right now.
Right now, okay.
As we are trying to leave this city, and one thing I'm reminded of is Eunice and the grandmother and Timothy, and what is
Right.
my responsibility in training this little baby, because his parents aren't focused there. So that's, but if I go so far away, I can't be close. I'm just really torn.
When we moved a year and a month ago, I really wanted to go to Colorado because that's where my daughter and granddaughters are. But God led us here to Mariposa. And just so that you all understand what I'm saying is we had offers on 6 other pieces of property that all fell through until this one. So, I mean, God was saying, nope, you're not going there. Nope, you're not going there either. I've got this place picked out for you. And now I kind of understand why He has us here. Although I really miss my family. And if you notice, I still have Colorado plates on my van. Bottom line is you go where God sends you. Okay? And that's a very individual thing, so I'm not going to generalize. If He wants you up in Idaho, you're going to Idaho if you're going to follow His leading, right? If He wants you to stay here in California, you're staying here in California. The principles that we looked at in these quotations as far as, where to locate, those need to hold true no matter where you are at. And I think the other big picture is, what are you doing for ministry? I think my ministry is more effective because I'm here in California than I would be in Colorado right now. And that's one reason He has me here. But that's me. And so, you just need to connect with God and let Him lead. I mean, that goes for all of us in a whole lot of things. And I know that sounds real general. You'd like me to say, you need to go, but I can't do that for you. Only God can do that.
Well, you have the criteria, and so
Right.
if something in this state fits in that criteria,
And if God,
country living.
and if God opens the way, yes. I'm a little reluctant to say, yes, we should go to, someplace far away. Because, the whole bloom where you're planted kind of concept, I mean, God has put you here where you are now because of the ministry He wants you involved in here and now. And if I go someplace completely different, I've got to start all over again. But that might be what you want you to do. I mean, missionaries do that all the time, right? But, they're definitely being led, and God opens the way for that to happen, or they wouldn't be doing it either. So, there's place for both. And I think the important thing is, just, okay, Lord, where do you want me? I'll go wherever. Just have that attitude. And then allow Him to just lead. And if He opens the way to go somewhere, that's where you go. And if He doesn't, you stay as involved in ministry as possible while you're still here, like the quote says that we read a little bit ago. Yeah.
In a way, Lot had a ministry in Sodom.
Yes.
Even though his family didn't want to leave, he was willing.
Yeah.
But that's why he stood at the gate to warn those that were coming in. He had a mission. The rest of his family didn't. They were living the livelihood of the city.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
If you're in the city and you're not yet ready to get out, I think that we should be warning the city.
Yes, definitely.
The National Sunday Law, in terms of the events that happened before that, Pope Francis is hiring people to be involved in Congress. Inviting, same sign, people to Congress, or they're inviting him rather. So that could serve as another one of those signs.
Oh, definitely.
In terms of us.
Yeah, it's all getting set up.
Being time to go. Yeah.
It's all getting set up. Yeah, and if we don't recognize it, God help us. Okay, we've been sitting here for quite a while. Let's have a short break. Let's aim for 5 minutes. I'll blow the conch again if I need to. When we come back, we're going to focus in on the second part of the time of trouble and what the prophecies tell us about our wilderness experience. Okay, go get a drink, go to the bathroom, whatever you need to do. Come right back.